let's take a close look at short answer listening questions. So this is what most short answer questions will look like on the IELTS. So you've got your word count directions up above where it says write no more than 3 words and or a number. Okay, so always have to pay close attention to that because it gives you the maximum number of words you're allowed to write in the blank. Then below that is your prompt, and this is the most important part of your of your short answer question, because this is where you figure out what you're supposed to look for or listen for as the speakers are speaking. All right, we're going to take a close look at these in just a moment, but this is just to get you familiar with the look of a short answer question. There's a second type of short answer question, and this one looks very similar to a different type you may have already seen the video for, the sentence completion questions. Now, these are different from sentence completion questions because if you notice in the answer choice or in the questions down below, these are not complete sentences, okay? So you're not finishing a complete sentence with your short answer. These are phrases. They can be short phrases or longer ones like this that you see here in questions 1 and 2. But anyway, they are not complete sentences. So really, that's one of the only things that differentiates this type of question from a sentence completion question. Okay, but anyway, this is another type of short answer question you might see where they give you a phrase and you need to fill in a blank in that phrase. Okay, otherwise it's just the same. Notice the word count and all of that. Very similar to the first type of short answer question we just saw. All right, so that's just to get you familiar with the look of these questions. Now let's talk about how to approach these questions. So, as you might guess, what your job is on this question type is to fill in the blank, right? You need to write a short answer to a question based on what the speakers say in the passage. You will be provided a word limit. It's usually 1 to 3 words, okay? And you are sometimes instructed that you can include a number in that, but that's an important piece of these questions is knowing your word limit. You don't want to miss a question because you added too many words. Another important part of these questions is that they need to make sense grammatically if there is especially surrounding information around the blank that you're supposed to fill in. Okay, so some words surrounding the blank, like we saw in the second type of short answer question at the beginning. So your answers need to fit. They need to make sense with the surrounding information, and they need to fit grammatically with the surrounding language, if there is any in the prompt. So if we look back to the second question type here, where it says needs to be blank. Okay, our answer will need to make sense grammatically in that particular phrase. Okay, number 2, food and medicine can be found blank. Okay, same thing. What you select, the word or words you select need to make sense. They need to fit logically and grammatically in this surrounding information. Okay, then back to our approach. The last thing here, when you analyze and predict, okay, so in the time you have before the speakers begin speaking, the 30 seconds, what your job is to try to predict as much as possible about the short answer before you listen. So this is where your job is to listen for or to look for, okay, what part of speech is it likely to be? Am I looking for a noun, verb, adjective, etc.? Often it's easy to know if you're expected to fill in a number or a date, especially on the first part of the listening test, right? Parts 1 and 2. You're often asked to fill in things like phone numbers and addresses and other types of numbers like that. Okay, so looking for that information is a key to answering these questions well, because the more you know about what to listen for, the more targeted you can be as you're listening for specific information when the speakers are talking. Okay, so that's a key part of the strategy for this question type. Okay, so let's practice this a little bit. So this is the first set of questions we saw at the beginning of the lesson, and I've highlighted in green and yellow some things that I think would be important to notice in the time before the passage begins as you're trying to make predictions about what to listen for. Okay, so what in green there, what we know is we're supposed to listen for some kinds of snacks, all right? And we have one of the answer choices filled in down below, okay? So we know one of the things is vegetable platter, okay? We're supposed to listen for other types of snacks that will be offered. All right, so we know these are going to be foods. I would probably circle snacks there and maybe even write a note down below by questions 12 and 13. Maybe you write the word snacks down there to help you remember that that's what you're supposed to listen for. Okay, but then let's continue on in the sentence here. There's an interesting part. So what kinds of snacks will be offered at the evening event? All right, now we're imagining that this is before we've listened and we don't know yet what the speakers are going to say. One question I would have is, well, is there an evening event and are there different events that are going to be described, right? Maybe there's an afternoon event in this listening passage too, or a breakfast, or something that's happening in the morning, right? We don't know yet. So that would be an interesting thing to underline, to keep in the back of your mind. Maybe there are going to be different events described by the speakers that we have to keep track of. And so you're supposed to listen for what foods, what snacks are going to be offered only at the evening event. Okay? Again, once we start listening, we will hopefully get this information and it will be clear. And maybe there is only one event that they're going to describe, one evening event. But this is the type of thinking that will help you to predict what information to listen for and to try to avoid getting in the trap of listening for the wrong information or getting tripped up by things that you weren't expecting to be discussed by the speakers. Okay, so I would underline evening event as well as a prediction strategy for this set of questions. Okay, now the second set of example questions we had. Okay, the parts in green there are things that I would really try to notice as clues about what to listen for as the speakers are talking. Okay, so we know, looking at the title, okay, and again, if there's ever a title, make sure to read it because that's important. Instructions for Sparky while we're away. Okay, we don't know exactly what this is going to be, but my guess is that we're going to hear someone giving instructions about how to take care of a pet, probably. Sparky is a pet name, usually a dog, I think. So I would guess that that's what we're about to hear. And as you look through the information provided in questions 1 and 2, it does seem to be related to an animal in some way, probably a pet. So we know that. That's something that would be a very solid guess for this set of questions. The parts in green then are things we should listen for. What needs to occur 3 times a day? What action? We know this pet needs to be, something needs to happen to it 3 times a day. Maybe it needs to be fed. Maybe, hopefully doesn't need to be washed. That would be a lot of washing for a pet 3 times a day, but maybe, we don't know. Maybe needs to be walked. Would be a good guess. Okay, these are all things that we might predict are coming, but we don't know, and so at least making a guess about what's there based on the context will give us some good insight about what to listen for as the speakers are talking. Okay, the second one, food and medicine can be found. I'm guessing that this is going to be a location. Where can we find the food and medicine? Okay, so that would make sense logically, and a location would make sense grammatically in this particular phrase that we have here for question 2. So those would be my predictions for this set of questions. And that's giving you an example of a good way to approach making predictions and analyzing these questions before the speakers begin talking. Okay, let's practice this a little bit. So here we have a sample set of short answer questions. Notice in the directions we're only supposed to supply no more than one word and or a number for questions 25 and 26. In the question itself, we're told that we need to answer the question, what can influence whether a behavior is considered normal or abnormal? Okay, so we're supposed to look for, if you look at questions 25 and 26, some factors. What kinds of factors are we supposed to listen for? All right, now factors is a noun. Okay, so possibly we should be listening for some adjectives to go in front of these nouns that they've supplied for us in question 25 and 26. So that is very helpful information as you're trying to predict what to listen for as the speakers are talking. All right, now some keywords there. What can influence? All right, so we're supposed to look for some influencing factors. And of course, then the important information is whether a behavior is normal or not normal. Okay, abnormal means not normal. Okay, so what factors can go into that type of decision? We already know that context is one of the things that the speakers are going to mention, and we just have to listen for the two extra factors. Okay, so I'm going to play the recording here. Why don't you try to answer these questions and listen for the correct answer as the speaker's talking?
That's a great example, Tricia. It really is a tricky process. The first thing to understand is that certain behaviors can be interpreted as normal or abnormal depending on the context in which they're carried out. And cultural or historical factors can also play an important role in shaping our views of normal and abnormal behavior too. In some societies, for example, it was common for people to mutilate themselves in grief, but now that would be considered self-destructive behavior and grounds for a visit to the psychologist.
Okay, so we got the answers in what the professor said there towards the middle in the sentence that reads this. The first thing to understand is that certain behaviors can be interpreted as normal or abnormal depending on the context in which they're carried out. And then the professor adds this additional information. It came quickly, so hopefully you're able to catch both answers, even though he said them very fast and close together. And cultural and historical factors can also play an important role. Okay, so that word factors that was in the question was supplied for you. Okay, so, and it was also not paraphrased. It was used here by the professor, and it came quickly though, so you had to hear both factors in order to write down your answers for questions 25 and 26. Some key information there that came after the professor mentions cultural and historical factors is paraphrased in the question itself. So it says, the professor said, and cultural and historical factors can also play an important role in shaping our views. Okay. This is a good paraphrase there in the question where the question asks you what can influence. Okay, shaping our views and what can influence are paraphrases there, and they're related to the correct answers we got down below, cultural and historical factors. As we predicted, cultural and historical are adjective forms, so these are adjectives that going in front of the word factors that give us the correct answer for 25 and 26. Okay, so that's how to approach short answer questions. Just to review a little bit, remember that you should always read the prompt carefully to determine the information you should listen for. Okay, so look for those key words. Ask yourself questions. What might be tricky about this question that I need to listen closely for? Okay, remember our example of an evening event. We didn't know whether there were possibly other events we should be listening for. That type of analysis can really help you to answer the questions because you're thinking about possibilities that may come as the speakers are talking. As always, pay close attention to the word limit in the directions. Okay, that's just a basic thing you need to do for any short answer question on the IELTS. And the last thing, listen for paraphrases of key words as you answer the question. Just like we saw in our sample question there, we had a good paraphrase of the information from the question and what the speaker said about what can influence people's determination of whether a behavior is normal or abnormal. Okay, so as always, as you're listening, expect that the key words from your questions are going to be paraphrased by the speaker. Okay, so those are short answer questions, giving you an idea about how to approach this type of very common question on the IELTS listening paper.